Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second semi-final of the World Schools Debating Championship 2015. Last night, we had teams from Australia and Canada vying for a place in the grand final. Let's take a quick look at last night's semi-final. The military struggle against ISIS should be conducted solely by Middle East nations.
ISIS comes from ethnic tension. Iran and Saudi Arabia are proponents of that ethnic tension and have ethnic differences.
Washington has an extremely narrow mindset and think that they're superior to the Middle Eastern leaders.
That is just an assertion that Saudi Arabia will not step in unless the US steps in.
They're not going to be able to do everything, but secondly, they're more likely to act in their own self-interest.
Where there are people who hate the United States, they hate ISIS much, much more.
By a unanimous decision, this panel gave the debate to Canada.
Tonight's semi-finalists have a hard act to follow, and that's my cue to introduce the teams to you. In proposition, we have the team from Singapore. Their first speaker is Arthur Lee. Their second speaker is Brian Yen. Their third speaker is Ernest Goh. The team from Singapore also have two further members who will not be speaking in this round, but they're just as important, so let's not forget them. Please give a hand for Chong Yi-shun and Samuel Low. And in opposition, we have the team from Pakistan. The first speaker is Zainab Hamid. The second speaker is Hassan Kessa. The third speaker is Taha Masood. The team from Pakistan also have two members not speaking in this round, and they are Hamza Tariq and Asad Zafar. As always, each debate is judged by a panel of judges from different countries. And tonight's judges are Mr. Joshua Park from Korea, Ms. Claire Ryan from New Zealand, Mr. Christopher Sanchez from Germany, Ms. Tracy Lee from Canada, Mr. Branislav Vechko-Chekin from Slovakia, Mr. Piwe Salukazana from South Africa, Mr. Tyrone Connell from Australia. Before we start, here are the rules. Each speaker will have 8 minutes to make their speech. After 1 minute, the timekeeper will signal once, like this. After this, the debaters on the other team may offer points of information to the speaker. The speaker may choose to accept or decline a point when it is offered. At 7 minutes, may be offered for the rest of the speech. At 8 minutes, the timekeeper will make a double signal like this. After this, the speaker must conclude within a few seconds. After the 6 main speeches, each team will have the opportunity to make a 4-minute reply speech. No points of information are allowed during reply speeches. The opposition will make their reply speech first. As part of the rules, both teams in the semi-finals were only given the motion an hour ago, during which time they've spent preparing themselves without assistance from their coaches or access to the internet. Now for the motion for this debate. This House regrets the media's focus on the personal lives of politicians. I'd like to remind everyone that the sides for this debate were determined at random, so the teams did not have a choice as to which side they will be debating on. So it gives me great pleasure to invite the first speaker for the proposition team to open the debate. Please welcome Arthur Lee.
I find it highly ironic that we're debating this in a media studio. But sometimes we believe that media space is not private space. And that's why we regret the media reporting on the personal lives of politicians. Who are politicians? We're talking about any individual who holds public office in a country. So we're talking about people like presidents, ministers, and parliamentarians. What is a politician's personal life? We're talking about anything that is out of the scope of a politician's official duties, and generally, things that he chooses to keep hidden from the public eye. Therefore, we're talking about things like a politician's religion in areas where he might be persecuted for it. We're talking about details regarding a politician's sexuality, for instance, or his relationship with his spouse and his children. What is our stance on side proposition? We regret the media's focus on the personal lives of politicians. We will note that this is a retrospective motion, so opposition needs to debate what the media has done, not what the media is likely to do in the future or what safeguards they can potentially impose on the media. Second, we don't regret other checks on the accountability of politicians that are reasonable and proportionate. Checks like criminal investigations on corruption, for instance. We believe that these acts are committed in the capacity of public office and are hence different. Third, we don't regret aspects of a politician's personal life revealed voluntarily, because by then it ceases to be part of his personal life and enters his capacity as public office. We're going to forward 3 arguments. First, that a media focus on the personal lives of politicians undermines privacy. Secondly, that it distorts politics. My second speaker will tell you why it hurts democracy. First of all, how media reporting on the private lives of politicians undermines privacy. The thrust of this argument is that the ability of politicians to create a private sphere for themselves and their families is sacrosanct, and the media's reporting on their personal lives undermines this privacy. Let's start from a very simple base question. Why does privacy matter? It matters because people, no matter who they are, have a right to have a personal space, to feel safe and comfortable. We think that politicians already have huge onerous responsibilities. Hence, it becomes all the more important that we give them a safe space in a world where they are constantly subject to scrutiny in the public spotlight. We underestimate what it's like to be a politician, many of us. The right to privacy matters to them perhaps more than anyone else. On balance, we think that people who just wanted to serve their country should not be forced to implicitly sign away some kind of fundamental right that they have as human beings. Moreover, we think that families never consented to give up this right to privacy, and as I'll go on to show, media reporting often disproportionately hurts them. Hence, given that politicians have an inalienable right to privacy, why does the media have an incentive to intrude and violate this right? A number of structural reasons. First of all, while we believe that not all media organizations are so wanton, like for example MediaCorp is a pretty good organization, they have many reasons to breach the privacy of politicians. First of all, because many media organizations tend to be profit-oriented. They're structurally inclined to appeal to things that people don't already know, and therefore pry very deep into the personal lives of politicians, like their relationships with their family, for instance. More insidiously, media organizations are often linked to political parties, so they have partisan interests that implore them to pry deep, to smear a politician's personal life, to uncover unsavory facts about themselves, and spin them in manners that are exaggerated or sensationalized. For example, in the USA, the Republican Tea Party paid Fox News to find the religious history and family history of Democrat senators. Therefore, the media is structurally inclined to break privacy. What are the harms of this? First of all, this comes at massive cost to the privacy of politicians. Their most intimate details about their personal life are splashed on the headlines. For example, in 2009, the UK tabloid The Sun hacked the private email account of the Conservative MP Lindsay Sminson and published her nude photographs. This is the kind of harm that we believe that politicians should not be subject to, because privacy matters to them too. More insidiously, we think the media often reports on the families of politicians. Opposition can't exclude this because a politician's relationship with his family often constitutes a big part of his personal life and something that media organizations are quite interested in. Therefore, there are huge harms to the families of politicians who are put under relentless media scrutiny. They are often driven to depression or suicide because of the huge public scrutiny they receive. For example, Brittany Palin, the daughter of Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, had a sexual history, and the fact that she was a single mother splashed across the internet, driving her to attempt suicide twice. So we think that individuals from the families of politicians who never consented to these harms should not be subject to them. The right of an individual citizen to an additional piece of knowledge is secondary to the right of a politician's family not to be driven to depression.
Sir,
yes.
Families do not consent to be paraded around with their politicians as well when they go into their election rallies. Why is that okay in your model?
Well, if politicians' families don't consent to them being at election rallies, then maybe we shouldn't allow politicians to forcibly drag them to these election rallies. That's our answer to you. So we think that the alternatives exist to address the competing interests of information and privacy. For instance, the fact that most politicians will reveal voluntarily quite a bit about themselves because voters don't like to vote for someone they don't know about. Therefore, the information they hide is highly private and the media breaks this privacy. Second argument, that media reporting distorts politics. Strategically, even if we admit that information is less important than privacy, reporting on the private lives of politicians often shuts out the most important information about politics. Generally, there is an unclear link between a politician's private life and his public policy, especially since he has already chosen to keep details about his private life hidden. Therefore, we think that it's incredibly likely that many politicians with perhaps unsavory personal lives can make important public decisions. What's more relevant, hence, in discourse is a discussion about a politician's policies, his ideologies, because these more directly affect a politician's office and his capacity to lead than politician's private life. And hence, these things should be the focus of public debate. The problem is that in a world with limited attention spans, discourse about a politician's private life and a focus on a politician's private life crowds out discourse about a politician's objective policies. For example, discourse about Obama's birth details or John Kerry's Vietnam War record prevented the US from actually having a cohesive discussion about these politicians' economic policies. The reason why this crowds out discussion about other more sound policies directly linked to his term in office is because often personal lives are attention-grabbing. Often they appeal to voters, and they appeal to voters in a very sensational way that crowds out discourse about other more important issues. And therefore we think that it's very damaging for political debate, because even if a politician's personal life affects his public policy, we think discourse about public policy is still more primarily important. But moreover, we put to you that media reporting on politicians harms the ability of politicians of religious or sexual minorities from even getting into power in the first place. Because there are many regions where they'll be castigated for their personal lives. We're talking about people like gay politicians in highly homophobic areas, people who identify themselves as Muslim in Islamophobic parts of the USA. We give you the example of how support for Idaho Senator Larry Craig fell after he was outed by the media as a homosexual. We think that media reporting on the private lives of politicians has allowed these people to be judged in a discriminatory manner for their personal lives. And we think that they should remain divorced from their capacity as public figures. We think that this media reporting is harmful because it denies them the right to run, and more importantly, it prevents them from advocating and prevents them from forwarding policies that will help their minorities once they come into office. It takes away that opportunity because they are no longer in office to start with. Therefore, because our side protects politicians and we protect politics, we're very proud to stand in proposition.
I thank the first proposition speaker for his speech. And now to open the case for the opposition, I call upon Zainab Hamid.
We think in today's debate, Team Singapore has mischaracterized how politicians actually campaign. They make it sound like, ladies and gentlemen, politicians have this completely private space which is completely divorced from their political campaign. Not understanding the fact that most politicians, ladies and gentlemen, if not all of them, actively bring their private lives into their campaigns, ladies and gentlemen. So for instance, when someone campaigns and says, I'm a church-going family man, and wins on that, ladies and gentlemen, that is someone actively bringing their private life into the political sphere. We think that that happens in the vast majority of cases. Most politicians run based on their family background or their personal background in order to win campaign points and in order to get personal appeal. Because Team Singapore, ladies and gentlemen, needs to understand what politicians understand. That campaigns, ladies and gentlemen, are often won on your ability to connect with your followers and to connect with your electoral pool, ladies and gentlemen. And because of that interest, politicians themselves often, ladies and gentlemen, give up their information voluntarily.
Point of information.
Thank you. Having established that, let's make a couple of clarifications. Singapore talks about politicians as only those people who hold public office. We think it obviously applies to prospective candidates as well, and workers in political parties in general, not just those who are in office. Second, they talked about personal lives as things like religion or sexuality. But ladies and gentlemen, we don't think that that's actually broadly what it's about. We think, ladies and gentlemen, anything not expressed in your capacity as a politician, things like being a church-going family man, ladies and gentlemen, anything not expressed in your capacity transparency as a campaigner or someone who is running for election
Point of
also
information.
contributes your personal belief and your personal lives. Beyond that, ladies and gentlemen, let's make one thing clear. Side opposition is not okay with illegally obtained data. We are not okay, ladies and gentlemen, with wiretapping, with breaking and entering. We think a lot of the examples they gave, things like finding out about someone's sexual orientation, someone's past sexual relationships, are all based on illegally obtained data, ladies and gentlemen. But what we are okay with is information that's derived from external sources, ladies and gentlemen, information that's pieced together from interviews in the public or shots taken in public as well. We think, ladies and gentlemen, those all constitute the personal life of the politician as well. We're not okay with illegally obtained data. Having established that, we think Singapore talked about two major things. First, this idea of the ability to create a private sphere, and second, ladies and gentlemen, this idea of crowding out important issues. So first, on this idea of the ability to create a private sphere, they talked about how politicians should be treated like ordinary individuals and how since this right is given to ordinary individuals, it should be extended to politicians as well. I'll talk to you about this more in my positive case, the idea that politicians owe a special responsibility. But on a second level, ladies and gentlemen, we think that politicians often misuse this private sphere to politically manicure a particular image and then present that to the public. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that privacy exists so that people could be who they are in public without the fear of public sanctions, not so they can actively be someone who they're not in order to dupe the public, ladies and gentlemen. We think that's the reality of privacy that politicians use in the status quo, but I'll talk more about that with my positive case. Second, in response to this idea of reporting how you crowd out important issues, we think there's tension in that point, ladies and gentlemen, when Singapore says they're okay with politicians willingly divulging their own information. In that case, ladies and gentlemen, politicians actually campaign on their own public information, and it's so much more likely for them to create a personality cult when you only have divulging their own information from the politician himself or herself. In that case, they can often only run on a very lopsided image of themselves in order to win debates, ladies and gentlemen, or it's not debates, sorry, that's us, in order to win campaigns. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that happens all the time. And it's going to be worse in Singapore's world when you don't have accountability from external sources. That kind of accountability is not going to exist. Personality cults still will exist, and those will still crowd out important issues. Singapore needs to solve that tension. Having established that, let's move on to my positive case. I'll be talking about three things today. First, why people have a special right to know about the personal lives of politicians. Second, why this actually benefits the political system. And third, my second speaker will be talking about how this especially benefits independent candidates and furthers the evolution of political thought.
Point of information.
I'll take you in a second, sir. So before I go on, actually, I'll take you now. Yes, sir.
You regret illegally obtained data. So information is important unless the politician hides it sufficiently well?
Sir, we think that there are certain things that are deemed criminal, and those we do not support criminal activity. We think if the media finds out personal information that has been divulged in the public sphere, ladies and gentlemen, through public shots from someone out in the open or from other sources, it's okay to report on that and focus on that. The principal issue here is focusing on personal information, ladies and gentlemen, not gathering personal information. We think Singapore needs to come onto those grounds. So the first idea, why people have a special right to know about the personal lives of politicians. Politicians, ladies and gentlemen, are different from other kinds of professionals. They've been voted into office, into their power by the people. We think they have a principal responsibility to these people. But we think, ladies and gentlemen, that in order to fulfill this responsibility, people need to know about more about the politician than the face that he's presenting, than the manicured public image that they present, ladies and gentlemen. The only way they can know this is if personal lives are scrutinized. Because your personal life, ladies and gentlemen, is also indicative of your personal beliefs and your character. How you present yourself, ladies and gentlemen, behind a podium when you're being videoed can be radically different from who you actually are. Trust me, we know, ladies and gentlemen. We think it's important to know what an individual is actually like, because this is directly linked to things like trustworthiness, things like reliability, things like actually standing by a stance that you declare, ladies and gentlemen. We think your character is directly linked to how you perform in office, because how you perform in office goes far beyond just your policy manifestos. Policies change, manifestos change all the time, ladies and gentlemen, but your character is the one constant which allows people to judge how you will be over a sustained period of time, ladies and gentlemen. Rob Ford was elected into office based on a decent political campaign, ladies and gentlemen. But when the media found out that he was essentially a crack addict, that told people that he was not reliable, that he was not trustworthy. We think people have a right to know this because that directly impacts how they perform in office and the kind of people, no thank you, and whether they're reliable or trustworthy. And we think trust is essential when it comes to electing your political representative. But second, ladies and gentlemen, we think politicians are not just legislators, they are representatives. When you elect a political representative, they reflect the character of your community as well, ladies and gentlemen. So the character of the politician reflects the character of the community. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that means if someone's political character, personal character is suspect, that it ends up trickling down to the character of that community or constituency as a whole.
Madam.
That's why people have a right to elect a character they believe is in line with their personal beliefs or in line with the collective character of their community. The reason that Lindsey Graham has been elected 4 consecutive terms as Senator of South Carolina is because his personality reflects the traditional values of the state, ladies and gentlemen. We think people have a right to elect people who reflect these personal values. But finally, why do we think that it's actually beneficial to the political system? The first idea is one of political apathy. We think, ladies and gentlemen, people are not robots. People don't simply compute things. They actually need to connect with politicians on a human level. The way they connect with politicians on a human level is if they know about them, is if they know about their lives, their personal stories, their histories, ladies and gentlemen. We think in that world, there's actually more likely to be a greater focus on things like manifestos because you actually have this initial positive association. That initial positive association doesn't exist in Singapore's world, ladies and gentlemen, when you're not actually appealing to your voter bank. But second, we think you're actually also creating political accountability because often what happens, ladies and gentlemen, is you will end up electing people based on their manifestos even though their personal beliefs are radically different. And because of that, they end up bringing in policies or manifestos that are sufficiently different from the manifestos that they initially campaigned on, ladies and gentlemen. If you actually had evidence or information about the personal character of that individual, we think this would be less likely to happen. Because our world, ladies and gentlemen, breeds accountability. Because our world, ladies and gentlemen, saves from political apathy. And because we think that politicians have a special responsibility. And because in their world, politicians will still divulge their own private information without any accountability and counterbalances, let the motion fall.
I thank the first opposition speaker for her speech. I know we've just whet your appetite for more exciting speeches, but it's time to take a short break. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back to the World Schools Debating Championship semi-finals. To continue the case for the proposition, I call upon Brian Yen.
I'm going to look at 2 areas in today's debate. First, how do we ensure privacy? Second, how do we protect democracy? But before any of that, let's do a very quick clarification because opposition tried to narrow today's debate. We have made it very clear from the start what is included in the conception of a personal life is not something that an individual politician will voluntarily reveal. Why? As they already explained, very often they use this as part of their campaign. So often this means it becomes part of the public sphere rather than the private or personal sphere. So let's disentangle these 2 ideas. The things that politicians voluntarily reveal is not part of this debate simply because it's now part of the public sphere rather than the personal lives of politicians. And that also clarifies the tension they claimed we had. First question, how do we ensure privacy? Now, they wanted to caveat illegal things out of this debate, but let's make a very quick clarification. Many ideas or many aspects of the personal lives of politicians are often obtained through illegal means. And you know why? Because if they didn't want to voluntarily reveal it anyway, very often there's things they want to hide. So, what they do when they caveat illegal means is really limiting their own case to a very narrow spectrum of things that you can somehow find out without engaging in illegal acts. But we're going to take them at their best anyway, which is now what I'm going to now. We do not believe that simply because you watched Mayor Harvey Milk come out of a gay bar, that the media should forcibly out him as an individual gay person and change the perspectives of the public on this politician. So, what does this mean? It means that there are instances where the media has reported and outed a gay individual without using illegal means, as they would like to caveat out of this debate, and yet has still caused grievous harm to this individual. Unless they tell us they support not standing for an individual simply because he is gay, we do not believe you should have the media focus on such an aspect of personal life. Second, they claim that privacy is not about having a double image. It's not about duping individuals. Let's make it very clear. What you want to do with this conception of privacy is completely up to you. What we believe privacy is about ensuring your own emotional security. Privacy is merely a means to an end, and very often a mechanism by which you achieve this emotional security. Whether is it by showing your real self or by showing a different self out in the public sphere. So we believe privacy is equally important to a politician if he wants to portray a different image of himself in the personal life rather, as well as the public life. So we still believe privacy is important. There was no direct clash with this idea. We expect this in the next speaker. Go ahead.
Politicians feel emotionally secure by lying to the people. How is that fair to the people who are going to elect that person for the next 5 years?
No, they don't lie to the people. They can omit information from their private lives. That is not lying. So, just because you can ask a gay person, do you support gay rights? But you don't have to know whether or not he was gay. And he doesn't have to lie to you about whether he supports gay rights, because he does not fear that simply because someone says he supports gay rights, they will think he's gay. So this is not a debate about lying, by the way. This is a debate about omission on things you believe is private. So it sounds like they've really had a bit of misguidance in their prep of this debate. But moving on, we talked a lot about children, about families who are often have their privacy infringed upon, and these are individuals who by no means consented to having their privacy infringed upon. We talked about the teenage mother example in first speaker, we heard no response. This is important because it takes them at their highest ground and still shows that for these individuals where privacy is not about duping, it is equally important to protect them. So, ours is a side that ensures privacy. Privacy is important. We've already taken this debate. But let's engage them on the grounds they wanted to talk about, which is about democracy. So, first thing we would like to clarify is that you don't need to know a person's private life to understand what he would vote for or how he would represent you in politics. Let's make it very clear. You don't need to know a person is gay. Rather, you can simply ask whether or not he supports gay rights. We don't think that you need to know about an individual's private life. In fact, their only example was about a crack addict and how we should know about his private life. Okay, why should we stigmatize individuals who have committed previously drug offenses? Why should we stigmatize past criminals if we can give them a chance, if they can adequately represent us now with their vote in parliament, with their version or their speeches in politics? We believe this sort of characterization the opposition is bringing to us is what people will vote upon. That character and a person's private life is tantamount to what he will do in parliament. We argued in first speaker this was misleading because very often an individual's personal life might not directly link to the way in which he will engage in politics, something they never really rebutted. But if they so believe, no thank you, that individuals' private lives are so important to a decision making in politics, then they must accept that we should forcibly out gay individuals. Then they must accept that we should review every single aspect of a politician's life. If they do not accept this, then they are disingenuous about their principle. So they must clarify this in the next speaker. If not, they'll just be a little wishy-washy. No, thank you. Second, their final idea was that sometimes the policies you say you will do in a campaign is significantly different from what you will elect eventually. Okay, then the checks and balances of the ballot box will continue to exist. Whether or not you know about a person's private life does not matter if he lies outright in a campaign. So you can just not vote for him in the next election. But let's take them at their best. Perhaps they meant it is different from their character rather than what they previously said. Because this debate is not about lying. If it was different from their character, no thank you, we think it's perfectly fine. Because very often we should not prejudge an individual. That was why when the media scrutinized Obama's birth details and called him a fundamentalist, we do not believe this sort of information should be pervading the public sphere. Should be something that people associate with Obama when he's perfectly fine in the policy decisions that he makes. An example, once again, what about my first speaker, but we heard no clear response. No thank you. But I'm going to move into my substantive material for today and continue clashing with their case, since they wanted to talk so much about how they want a positive association or a personality cult. I'm going to explain how it hurts democracy in two ways. One, it creates a terrible cult of personality. So, we'll take them and their own argument and flip it against them. Show you why cult of personality is a terrible thing for democracy. Second, I'm going to show you how the media is often a mechanism to hurt opposition members. No, thank you. First, how a cult of personality is created. So, the media provides a platform for politicians to glorify and exaggerate aspects of themselves to achieve a greater reputation. This sort of glorification often lays the foundation for a cult of personality. So, for example, Panama's General Noriega used the media to create a cult of personality through exaggerating his own wealth and fitness, ironically, to prop up their corrupt regimes. Often, the asymmetric control of the media, especially in illiberal regimes, a spectrum which they have largely been unwilling to engage us on, means that the media and the cult of personality that is created unfairly benefits certain individual politicians. Even if it doesn't unfairly benefit anyone, what we believe is that this distorts democracy in a way in which people vote on the basis of a cult of personality rather than politics and the way in which they are represented in parliament. So that is the first way they distort democracy. The second way is that they hurt opposition politicians because statesmen can use the media to malign and sometimes even intimidate opposition politicians. For instance, Silvio Berlusconi in Italy used the media to malign opposition members, attempting to cast them as being close to economic rivals. This unfair impediment to opposition members is distorted democracy because it entrenches incumbent power. We admit politicians may try to do this themselves using their own voice. But crucially, what the media creates is a platform for dissociation. So it's very easy for the politician now to say, it was the media that said it. It was someone else who reported it rather than me glorifying myself or me impeding an opposition politician. So this unique platform distorts democracy. This unique platform hurts democracy, hurts politics, as well as hurts the individual family and the individual politician. For all these reasons, we're proud to stand on Team Proposition.
I thank the second proposition speaker for his speech, and now to continue the case for the opposition, I call upon Hassan Kessa.
People are allowed to voluntarily divulge information about themselves. But when they do so, ladies and gentlemen, it creates a personality cult which distorts democracy. Side proposition is contradictory, ladies and gentlemen, because on one hand they say it is okay if you voluntarily divulge information about yourself, but when you do it and it creates a personality cult which leads to you either being maligned or it leads to the distortion of democracy, we are not okay with it. We don't see the difference in a model, ladies and gentlemen, where you tell the media to out your information and then use it to lionize yourself, or in a model where you use another party does it. So we don't see, ladies and gentlemen, how side proposition is principally consistent. Having dealt with that, now let's move on to the three issues of this debate. Firstly, the need of the policy. Secondly, their moral justification. And lastly, the efficacy. The first thing first. Our burden as side opposition is not to legalize criminal activity, ladies and gentlemen. You cannot expect us to argue that we should have cameras in the homes of every individual and then find out about their personal lives. But what we can expect to argue is something that happened in the case of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, when she gave an interview about a personal relation between her and Bill Clinton, which led to the person, Bill Clinton, being accused and then being taken out of power. We believe that's something that's reasonable, that's something that does happen in the real world, not probably in Singapore, but in other parts of the world, and that is the real debate. So we don't believe they're being fair when they're forcing us to argue a burden where we're supposed to argue going into people's home and then finding out about them. This debate is not just about you being gay, ladies and gentlemen. It's about your stance on issues like minority. It's about you not being fair to your people. It's about you not being loyal and trustworthy, ladies and gentlemen, when you claim to be a morally upright person, but inside you're a drug addict. People have a right to know that information. Side opposition should tell you why. Proposition should tell you why they should not. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, this deals with the issue of need and the policy. The second issue, the moral justification. And this is where we believe side opposition dropped some arguments from side opposition. We told you in the first level, ladies and gentlemen, that the personal life is inextricably linked with the politician's private life. This is a link that side proposition never challenged, ladies and gentlemen. When we tell you, when Obama campaigns about his policies, he does not just campaign about them on being a democratic candidate. He believes that he's a morally upright person, he's loyal, he's trustworthy, and in often cases minorities vote for him because he's Obama, he's a black representative. So we believe, ladies and gentlemen, in often cases, politicians' personal values are inextricably linked with their job. So we believe it is impossible for you to differentiate between them, and it is an important part of public debate that when you're able to glorify yourself as a politician, when you're able to manicure your image as a politician to being a family man, into being a churchgoer when you're a Republican, that you should also be willing to accept the fact that people should have access to the other side of the information. Secondly, they talked to you about privacy. They said privacy is really important because people should be themselves. And this is a refutation we already gave you, ladies and gentlemen. Privacy was enshrined to allow people to be themselves. When politicians use that to not be themselves, to be someone that they're not and dupe the people, that is not upholding the purpose of privacy. Then what is the point of giving people the right to privacy when they're not upholding the purpose of it? On a second level, ladies and gentlemen, they said people have not consented to it. In certain cases, ladies and gentlemen, your positions of responsibility matter more than whether or not you consent to something or not. We believe when you're responsible for governing the lives of people for the next 4 year. When they're going to decide what kind of policies you pass, what kinds of beliefs you're going toward, when you're shaping the lives of people, then your consent is not valid. About family consent, we told you, ladies and gentlemen, families often don't want to be paraded at every rally, at every political manifest, at every political function. They still have to do so, ladies and gentlemen, because they're a part of that politician's life. So in the case of a family's consent, ladies and gentlemen, we believe it's already violated in their model when politicians willingly take them to these events. They said, well, it's forcible, you can't take them. It's not as black and white as that, ladies and gentlemen. Politicians do it for their personal benefit, so we don't believe that their argument about consent actually stands. Yes, sir.
If you believe it's so important for people to know the other side of the information, would you forcibly out gay politicians?
No, in the case of, if someone gives an interview about it, or if you find out about it because the person hangs out in public, then yes, but we will not go into their house and do it. We also believe, ladies and gentlemen, that in certain cases, these characteristics that you're talking about are relevant. So when you talk about something like, ladies and gentlemen, a person being a gay, but associating with Republican values that are against homosexuality, it is important for the people to know. Because in order for the people to make an informed choice about the person that's going to represent you, they should know the kind of values that you espouse. So if it's a Republican person who feels that he wants to associate with a person who is not a homosexual, a person who is a homosexual and a politician cannot represent him accurately. He can't associate with them truly, and people have a right to form true associations. Associations that right proposition model does not allow them to have. Lastly, ladies and gentlemen, the arguments about efficacy. Here, side proposition came to us with about number of ideas. They said the problem with this case is it takes away the focus from policies and shifts the focus on individual characteristics. Firstly, we believe their model, when it allows politicians to voluntarily divulge information, also does that. So we don't believe that they're taking away the focus from individual personalities. In fact, in their model, it is more one-sided, because politicians can say whatever they want to about themselves, just the people can't criticize them. So that focus will still exist. It will be a biased, one-sided focus. Secondly, we believe that in certain cases, personalities are very important to the policies that you stand for. So if you stand for a policy or for an economic policy, ladies and gentlemen, the strength of your delivery of that policy will depend on how strongly you believe in it, ladies and gentlemen. A politician, in order to carry out a policy, has to believe in, has to have a certain level of belief in it. That's why you align yourself with a certain party, because you believe that you want to be a party that focuses on certain policy and then pass them. So they have to show to you, ladies and gentlemen, how politicians are always divorced, their personal opinions and their practical policies are always diverse, because we as side opposition do not believe they are. Lastly, they said, ladies and gentlemen, political parties will now be able to use this against other parties. They had to show to us why does not happen in their model. In their model, that's more likely to happen when political parties know that they can bank only on reputations of certain politicians and use them to their advantage. In our model, political parties cannot use that to their advantage. You know why? Because the people have another form of information. The people know the truth, ladies and gentlemen. So political parties can't simply say, Obama's a morally upright man, hence vote for him. Because the other side that exists that might say something that's not that favorable. They then have to bank on policies, ladies and gentlemen, because they don't have the fallback of relying on that person's reputation, because there is the truthful side that exists. Having dealt with all of that, ladies and gentlemen, now let's move on to my positive case, which will talk to you about how this helps in the progression of political thought by diverting media attention. You need to realize, ladies and gentlemen, that politics are not just about political parties. They're not just about media's houses who have capital. They're also about independent politicians. Independent politicians don't really have manifestos and policies, ladies and gentlemen. What they do have is personal stories. What they do have is their narratives, ladies and gentlemen, about how they got big, about how they found out about a certain policy and they wanted to be a politician. Inside propositions model, when you don't allow media houses to focus on individual characteristics or parts of private lives of politicians, those kinds of politicians can never come up. Because if it's always about policy, ladies and gentlemen, a person who is an independent candidate, who is not associated with a mainstream party, does not have the opportunity to come up and represent himself as an individual who has a story, who has a narrative. Our model caters to that independent, ladies and gentlemen, because that independent is able to use his personal story, his personal narrative as a means of coming up. People or media houses can divert attention to his life that their model would not, ladies and gentlemen, in order to see that there is another form of opinion important. Why is this important, ladies and gentlemen? Because democracy is not just about the mainstream opinion. It's not just about having 2 or 3 mainstream parties who have rigid opinions with people not willing to change because they're fearful of what their party will do to you if you change. We believe democracy is also about allowing new opinions to come up. It's about allowing progressive thought to come up. And progressive thought can only come up through people who are not embedded in your political system for 20 and 30 years. For the simple fact, ladies and gentlemen, that side proposition had to show to you how media attention on the personal lives of politicians would harm their role as politicians. We believe it better because they're more responsible, because they're more accountable. They had to show to you why the people who are going to rule you for the next 4 years do not owe you anything, do not owe you that information. They did not show to you. And the last level, now they have to show to you how independents can come up with a model where there's only focus on policies and not on personal narratives of individuals. For the simple fact that they don't stand for a democratic society, both side opposition.
I thank the second opposition speaker for his speech. I'm sure you're all keen to find out what our final speakers have to say. Stay with us as we take a quick break. Welcome back to the World Schools Debating Championship semi-final. To continue the case for the proposition, I call upon Ernest Goh.
A lot of their case fell when we observed that we didn't regret the voluntary revelation of information. Because then independent politicians can reveal their personal stories of their own accord. Because then the most relevant information can be determined by politicians and consequently nevertheless voluntarily revealed. The only response we heard to all of this analysis was, it's a contradiction. It's not. They tried to say, well, if it's irrelevant, why do you support it being reviewed at all? Here's our response. Because sometimes if a politician wants to campaign on Christian principles, maybe he can cite his church-going habits as evidence for that. But what we are saying is that many people don't want to base their stances on those issues. And it's for everyone else to decide on their own accord what basis they campaign on that we've proudly made this stance in proposition. I have two questions. One, has the media violated the right to privacy? Second, has it violated the right to good governance and democracy? One, on privacy. We've begun this speech and this debate with the argument that the right to privacy is an extension of the right to feel safe. And we've told you that politicians of all people need safe spaces away from flashing cameras and screaming headlines so that they can be themselves, sometimes somewhere else. No, thank you. We've asked them from the beginning of this debate why it was right that Lindsay Smithson's nude pictures were reviewed in The Sun, exposing her body image vulnerabilities to the world. No. We've asked them why it was right for the lives of children and spouses to be excoriated to every single public eye. And we've asked them why it was right that the daughter of Sarah Palin tried to take her own life twice because the stigma of her friends as a result of her status as a single mother wasn't enough without the irony and the consequent abuse of newspapers. We've asked them why all these harms were right, even if we have one more unqualified politician in office and they've never engaged us on the comparative. The only sweep-away response we heard was, but we don't have to support information that's obtained illegally. I have a number of responses. One, this is a retrospective motion. The second speaker said, well, we don't have to legalize criminal activity. I'm sorry, neither team has this power. What we are doing is looking in retrospect at what the media has done. So you have to defend the worst actions because they've already occurred. Second, if this is true, you've lost about 90% of your case, the motion and your principle. No. They said, well, we want to review that he's a bad family man. I would submit that you observe when someone is a family man at home. So if you don't go into those areas, I would venture that you don't tend to know if he's a good or bad family man because he tends not to beat up his wife in public. So if you exclude all these things, I would venture you don't have any of that information either. No, thank you. In fact, we've said the reason why people keep secrets is because they are, guess what? Secret. So the reason and the only circumstances where they do have these benefits are where they intrude the lives of these people. Finally, we will ask them, information is so important, right? But only when the politician makes a public error and slips and tells his friend in public in front of the Fox News reporter that he's gay. So this is the incredibly small number of cases that they reduce themselves to defending. Finally, we said, even on these grounds, it's bad. Even if the gay politician was public and went to a gay bar, we don't think that should be reported either. So even on their best case scenario, none of these harms are legitimate. No, thank you. So let's compare the harms. Let's take them on the highest point. Suppose that one more crack addict gains access to office and runs for the next 5 years. That's a price I will pay if his son does not commit suicide, if he's not driven to depression. We've submitted that sometimes the right of a flagrant mob to have one more access to trivial information does not weigh up against the right of every single other person to feel safe. And it's on this basis that I'm very proud to make this case. It depends on the right of people to privacy, to respect, and to dignity. We need a response to all these harms we've laid upon them right from the beginning of this debate, although by the time they do so in their third opposition speaker, I think it will be too late. No. I have my second area of rebuttal then. Has the media improved democracy? Their first argument that they gave us in their second speaker was independent candidates. One, they can review this information on their own. So honestly, this is a wash. But alright, let's take on this ground anyway. Do you seriously think that the independent candidate with no backing of a rich party that funds media organizations will be reported on in a good light? I don't think so. So we can have all the same benefits when he reveals these personal stories on his own, without the harms of the Republican Party bankrolling Fox News to smear his name. So it's independent politicians who are hurt on their side. We need a response to this as well. But here are 3 systemic reasons why our team is better for democracy than their side is. 1, because their side distracts from the real issues. Now, we'll first and foremost observe, hold on, from the beginning of this debate, as we've done, that character voting tends not to be a good way to engage in policy in the first place. We've given you good track records of examples where people fixated on wrong issues, like Obama's birth record, that we've said were irrelevant details. We said Bill Clinton was one of the most economically sound presidents in the history of the USA, despite the fact that he had adultery outside of his marriage. We've asked them why it was wrong that we asked them that we told them that it was wrong that the American public chastised him for these things and could have voted him out had the media done worse things. Yes.
People knew that Sarah Palin was a single mom because she came out in public. The harms that you're talking about exist in your model as well. Talk about the benefits that don't exist in your model.
Alright, but we are saying is the principle that sometimes there can be a dissociation between your private life and your ability as a public office holder tends to be really, really separate. And that's why your own example proves our case. What we are saying is that the fact Bill Clinton could be a good administrator while still engaging in adultery means that many other people who kept lives of adultery secret could well have equally been good politicians as well. That's our response. That example proves our case, not yours. But that gratuitous language was, but you're doping people into doing wrong things. Number of responses.
Sir?
1, no we aren't, because the most relevant information, as I will show, will still be relevant. We don't think people should be misled into voting on things like this person's surname or things like gratuitous information about his private life. We don't think that that's right in the first place. But second, why don't you think that it's duping people when their side allows politicians to keep things safe within their own borders, within their own homes? Because that's what we say, as long as you conduct all these indiscretions at home, it will be illegal for the media to have done those things, so we don't support it. I would submit that their side also encourages duping, because as long as it keeps the secret safe enough, the same thing happens on both sides of the house. So in principle, if we believe that duping is so bad as to warrant the violation of the rights of a person to privacy, I think that you have to abandon your stance, which is not defending the vast majority of this debate. So we took this analysis further, right from our first speaker, but again, no response. We said even if private lives are relevant information, they come at the cost of more relevant information. Because we said that there exists a crowding out effect. Because we've said the public imagination has a limited attention span. Column interests tend to be finite as well. So obviously, we've said, every time we report on some irrelevant information, no thank you, this comes at the cost of something even more relevant. And so we've argued, even if adultery is a valid way to base your vote, some things like the actual policy instances matter even more. And we said, therefore, if the two are necessarily mutually exclusive to an extent, we'll march on the things that are directly relevant to his capacity as a public office holder, no thank you, then it's indiscretions to be reviewed. That was the line of analysis we gave you right from our first speaker. Again, absolutely no response. So first and foremost, we don't dupe people. We fixate them on the right issues and the right stances. Second, we said that the media's intrusion has constituted an effective ban on minority politicians. No. We've asked them why it's right that no gay politician can ever run in the conservative Bible Belt, because Fox News will splash his most vulnerable self on the tabloids of their front page. They said it's the right of a Republican to not want to dissociate with a gay man. I think that's disgusting. I think that's abhorrent. That stands in contradiction of every single democratic principle, like the right of anti-discrimination, like laws against anti-discrimination, like constitutions that protect the right of all these people to nevertheless run. In every single democratic state, the right of somebody to hold public office and to be equitably represented is enshrined in constitutions. If they would tear this thing down, I submit that this is ridiculous and it's abhorrent. They don't even stand for democracy. Third, we said this entrenches incumbent power. They said, but he will still reveal this information anyway to build the cult of personality. We said yes, but what we regret is the fact that the media has carried these stories and focused on them excessively, as opposed to all the bad things he's done. And what we would say is that in all these cases, they try to say we can break the monopoly. But no, we told you that this debate, and my second speaker's constructive argument, occurs sometimes in debates where media is controlled by a political arm, by somebody who really holds the levers of power in most of democratic society. In all of these cases, we've ventured that this is wrong, because no monopoly power is broken when the arms of power, when the ones who write the stories are also the henchmen of the person in power. So they don't break the monopoly. All the media's focus has done is to spread these stories like wildfire and to entrench this personality cult, making it harder for new entrants like the independent politicians they want to enter power. Consequently, because we protect privacy as well as democracy, I'm so proud to stand in proposition.
I thank the third proposition speaker for his speech. And now to continue the case for the opposition, I call upon Taha Masood.
So Singapore had a very strange conception of what a personal life is. Apparently, the moment that a politician personally puts his personal life into the public sphere, it ceases to be his personal life. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that was a very odd conception for them to take from the start. We think the truth is that anything divorced from your manifesto, from your party line, from anything strictly political, ladies and gentlemen, is, as a matter of fact, your personal life. Which is why we think, ladies and gentlemen, that they have misconstrued how this debate was run in the first place. They, ladies and gentlemen, need to be against the act of the politician putting his personal life into his political sphere because of every argument they've run about how it distracts from the political campaign of that individual and lends focus instead to his personal life. We think there's a contradiction in their case when when 2/3 of their arguments focus entirely on how bringing someone's personal life into politics takes away from the value of politics, from the integrity of politics. We think because of this contradiction, really the only argument left standing is this idea of privacy, which guess what, we'll be refuting shortly. But before that, a couple of other clarifications which need to be made. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that this idea of persecuting homosexuals is based again on the idea of attaining data illegally. And over here we need to reiterate what this debate is about, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think in a conservative society where you're likely to be murdered for being gay, your homosexuality is a matter of public knowledge. Something which could be found out without somebody literally breaking into your house, reading your correspondence, going through your letters, ladies and gentlemen. We think this debate is simply not about that. If, however, it is known that someone is gay and the media chooses to focus on this for whatever reason, that's the point of this debate, ladies and gentlemen, and not even gay, because they continuously contextualize this in the case of oppressing people for being minorities. What about people, ladies and gentlemen, who call themselves churchgoers? What about the single mother example they themselves are running? What about people who run in the campaign of being family men? We think that those are generally much more pertinent than whether or not someone is gay, and we think time and time again they've tried to fight this debate on the easiest possible ground that they could try, and not really a realistic one. But that said, there are two clashes in this debate. Number one, and if we prove this one, their entire case collapses. Is a politician's right to privacy absolute? And number two, which model leads to a better political system? So on to the first one, ladies and gentlemen, but before that.
Do you believe that Obama's birth certificate matters more than his economic policy?
Sorry? No, I don't think necessarily that his economic policy is affected by his personal life. But the fact is, people trust him, ladies and gentlemen, because of the character he presents himself as. And we think that character is ultimately tied to qualities which aren't political, but human. The idea that he has integrity, the idea that he's trustworthy, the idea that he's honest, the idea that he's paving a new way forward for the American people. When he continuously identifies as a family man, ladies and gentlemen, by bringing his wife and his daughters to practically every political function he attends, then that is him bringing his political life bringing his personal life into politics. That's him reaping the benefits of it, and we're okay with that, basically, ladies and gentlemen, because we think, as we've already pointed out to you, that that's necessary for people to be interested in politics in the first place. But on to our first clash. Is a politician's right to privacy absolute? And they had a couple of premises here. Number one, it's basically just that it is a fundamental right. So we had a few responses to this, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, we're not violating the right to privacy because we're not doing anything illegal. If a politician is doing anything in the public sphere, ladies and gentlemen, guess what? It's public knowledge, it's publicly available, his right to privacy is never on any level compromised. But second, we think that even if on some minute degree we were compromising on his right to privacy, the politician is in a position in society where the people have a special right to know. This isn't only about the politician's rights, ladies and gentlemen, it's about the duties he owes the people and why they have rights they can expect from the politician. Because we told you already, ladies and gentlemen, that your personal life is how people can identify with your character, and this character represents all these ideas of reliability, of trustworthiness. This character is constant where your manifestos aren't. This character, ladies and gentlemen, gives you the right to know who to trust. They dismissed Rob Ford, ladies and gentlemen, but the matter of the fact is, in their model, this ordinary guy could come up with a perfectly decent political image for himself and get voted in. The media will expose the fact that he's not trustworthy, that he does crack, ladies and gentlemen, that he's basically spoiled the trust of the people. And we don't think that on any level that's acceptable. That's why we need to know about the politician lives, because they are held in this higher degree of scrutiny by society because, ladies and gentlemen, they represent you, they represent your communities, analysis brought by Zena, which was not contended with by Singapore, and they ultimately owe this duty to you. Nothing which they said responded to this. But second, we also told you privacy isn't so that you can be duplicitous. And Singapore basically said it's okay for you to be a completely different person as a politician and as a human being. We don't think that's okay in this case, ladies and gentlemen, because the point of privacy was never so that you could be two separate people. The point of privacy privacy was only
Point of
so that you could
information.
protect certain private things about yourself, which can still happen in this model because we're not illegally seizing anything from you, which you wouldn't have allowed to be made public in the first place. So that was problematic on their side. But second, this idea of harms to the family. And we think, ladies and gentlemen, that this was really odd because more often than not, the families of politicians do pretty well. They're rich, they've got rich fathers and mothers, they're
Point
in
of
well-connected
information.
families. So this idea of politicians' children going around committing suicide is a bit odd. But actually, the example they raised, Sarah Palin, her being a single mother, that's actually contradictory because in their own model, ladies and gentlemen, they tell you that you're allowed to divulge this information about yourself. Sarah Palin divulged all the information about herself, which they're saying led to her children trying to commit suicide. So we don't understand how that's different
Point
in
of
their model.
information.
But on the third level, why is this exclusive to politicians? Why not literally any celebrity ever, ladies and gentlemen, if you feel that the family might have its privacy violated? We don't think they managed to prove to us why this is in any way specific to politicians. But we told you a couple of other things about why their right to privacy isn't absolute. Because as we stress time and time again, your personal life is tied to your activity as a politician, ladies and gentlemen. It's tied to what you do. And besides that, we think that their refutation to us was a bit odd when they tell you time and time again, no, now you just need to hide your crime. We think you're more likely to stop beating your wife, ladies and gentlemen, than you are to hide beating your wife, because it's a lot easier to just stop beating your wife. It runs the risk of it becoming public knowledge and your life being ruined. So we think that that clash falls firmly in our favor, and because privacy is really the only argument they had standing, we win the debate already. But let's go on to the next one anyway. Which model leads to a better political system? They said two things. Number one, there's an unclear link between private life and public policy. Basically, you're taking away from their manifesto, from their actual politics. That's literally your world, ladies and gentlemen, where you're allowing the politician to sell their private life out and then saying the media can't do it anyway. Also, would you be opposed to rhetorical speeches, ladies and gentlemen? Because that also takes away purely from the purely political value of a manifesto, of an idea. It's again trying to appeal to the people, which we don't have a problem with, which we think is okay. But second, they told you that the media's attention leads to either a cult of personality or maligning. The status quo has both. We think on one level, to some degree, that's balanced. In your model, this maligning idea doesn't exist to any degree, but the cult of personality, ladies and gentlemen, something dangerous does exist. Because these politicians will selectively divulge information about themselves, which they believe the public has the right to know. When nobody provides a counter-check to this, a counterbalance to this, then this politician gets away scot-free. That's bad, ladies and gentlemen. And besides that, the idea about smear campaigns. We think, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, if a politician is outed as an adulterous individual, then the people should decide whether or not that's basis for them electing that person. Not the politician, not the media. And second, we think, no, not every media house is a tabloid. There's lots of respectable ones out there, and those tend to be the ones people frequent for political information. But we told you a lot of things they didn't engage with. We told you about political apathy being created as a result of the media not being involved, ladies and gentlemen, because you need to connect with them. Let's talk about Sarah Palin again. Her child has Down syndrome. People identify with her. Through her, they identify with her child. Through her child, they identify with the idea of needing to fix Down syndrome, of challenging that idea. We told you about accountability. They didn't even address that, ladies and gentlemen. And we told you about independent candidates, which they dismissed by using the contradiction in their case. We think, ladies and gentlemen, on every reasonable ground, this debate's already fallen. Because the only argument they have left is privacy. Because every harm they've outlined of a politician's private life being brought out in the open is present in their model. Let the motion fall.
I thank the third opposition speaker for his speech. All the speeches have been done, but before we start the concluding reply speeches, we're going to take a short break. Welcome back to the World Schools Debating Championship semi-finals. Now we move to the teens' 4-minute concluding reply speeches. This is how it works. The opposition team will deliver their reply speech first. There are no points of information during the reply speeches. After 3 minutes, the timekeeper will signal once to let the speaker know they have only 1 minute left. After 4 minutes, the timekeeper will signal twice. To deliver the opposition's reply speech, I call upon Zainab Hamid.
Team Singapore should lose this debate because their conception of what a personal life was flawed right from the get-go. They basically said that your personal life is everything you keep hidden, all of your secrets. That's not your personal life, ladies and gentlemen. Someone could be a church-going family man, and that could be displayed in public, but that remains his personal life. It doesn't become something that is associated with his job or associated with his capacity as a politician, associated with his manifesto, associated with his policies. All of those things are associated with his job. The fact that he's a church-going family man is still his personal life, ladies and gentlemen, even though it's not necessarily a secret. And when we understand that Singapore has not truly been arguing the spirit of the motion, ladies and gentlemen. Because when they say they're okay with information, personal information brought into the eye of the media by individuals, that is still focus by the media on personal lives, ladies and gentlemen. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that truly arguing the spirit of the motion would have been taking on the burden that any kind of focus on the personal lives, whether that information is voluntarily divulged or whether that information existed in the public sphere anyway, that was the true burden of Team Singapore today, ladies and gentlemen. Not just pushing this burden on us to defend illegally obtained data or data that is only solely obtained, ladies and gentlemen, in ways that violate the rights of individuals. Having established that, ladies and gentlemen, we think the fact that Team Singapore has not actually argued the spirit of the motion led to them defeating 2/3 of their own case. Their entire argument about creating a personality cult in Second Speaker defeated by their own conception of the debate. Their entire argument, ladies and gentlemen, about crowding out relevant issues and making things only about personality, defeated by their own conception of this debate, ladies and gentlemen. All of the practical harms that they said exist in our model exist in their model too, but to a greater extent. So their entire practical imperative for this motion essentially falls flat right there. The only thing they have left, ladies and gentlemen, is this idea of privacy, something we think we have dealt with, and let's go on to tell you how we did that. First we told you, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not our burden to only defend illegally obtained data. We're not going to stand here and say that, you know what, criminal activity, things like wiretapping, things like breaking or entering was okay. It was our burden to defend a generic media focus on attention, not illegal garnering of information, ladies and gentlemen. We think that was an unfair burden to place on us on the status quo. And linked to this, we told you that most of the examples they gave, most of the information they talked about, things like revealing your sexual orientation, things like revealing past sexual relationships, that was all based on illegally obtaining data, ladies and gentlemen, something that we don't think is legitimate anyway. But we told you beyond that, even if we are violating the privacy of an individual, we think that when a politician steps into office, they need to understand they have a responsibility that is different from every other individual in society. A responsibility that exists because they derive their position from society. A responsibility that exists, ladies and gentlemen, because their character is directly linked to their performance in office. Because not only that, their character is directly linked to how others perceive the character of their community and their constituency. And that's why people have a right to know the character of politicians. They have a right to know, ladies and gentlemen, if that individual is a church-going family man, if the woman is a single mother, ladies and gentlemen. We think they have a right to know these things, and we don't think we ever heard a response from Team Singapore. They simply kept reasserting that, you know what, people have a right to privacy, when we repeatedly told you that first, it's not being violated in the same way that you're saying, and second, privacy is not absolute. You need to talk about the rights of people in society as well. We think on this idea of privacy, Team Pakistan has taken this debate. And since that's the only argument Singapore really had standing, I guess it means we should win, ladies and gentlemen. But the second thing, which is about things that they dropped, all of the harms that we outlined. We talked to you about things like political apathy. We said the only reason people are actually interested in manifestos in the status quo, what they want people to be interested in, is because they initially form a positive association with a person's character. That doesn't happen in their world, ladies and gentlemen. Or if it does, because people personally divulge their information, again, that's a contradiction, ladies and gentlemen. We think that Team Singapore has not argued the spirit of the motion. Team Singapore, ladies and gentlemen, has not truly proved why any of the harms they outlined in our world will not exist in their world. We think they'll exist to a greater extent because people can create their own narrative, can lionize themselves, and there'll be no accountability or counterbalance. For all those reasons, Pakistan takes the debate.
And now to conclude the case for the proposition and the debate as a whole, I call upon Brian Yen.
Let's look at this. It is always very exciting, but sometimes very saddening, to launch a pseudo-definitional challenge in first, not really commit to it, and then launch it out loud in third speaker, and then in reply. That is not a debate strategy anywhere allowed. Then let's look at the two worlds that emerge in today's debate, and see how opposition's world has been contradictory, narrow, and very often painful. The world of the opposition was one where the biggest problem was their unwillingness to engage in the real debate. We have told you from the start that when a politician bases his campaign on information he reviews voluntarily, this is an issue of politics. This is not an issue of a private life, which he chooses not to review. That will be an issue about secrets, which he chooses not to disclose. In fact, their third speaker said, what is reviewed in public is the public sphere. Yes, that's what we've been saying from the start. What politicians review in public is the public sphere, which is why it's not relevant in today's debate. But even where they did engage the real debate, they were disingenuous. We asked from the start, would you forcibly out gay politicians? They murmured for about 5 seconds before saying, we'll only do it if they say it in an interview. So clearly they won't. Clearly they don't believe that information is that important that we should give it to individuals. They were unwilling to engage the real debate. Where they did, they were disingenuous. That is the kind of world they created, a kind of world we cannot stand for. More importantly, they were a world of pain. Because politicians are outed merely because they walked out of a gay bar. And to them, watching Harvey Milk walk out of a gay bar is somehow an illegal act and therefore is caveated out of this debate. No, it's not. And very often, when information is obtained by legal means, it still can hurt individuals. It still can hurt individuals when the most secret and most private information of his own life is revealed to the public. Why should you force a politician who wants to serve the nation to reveal his sexuality when he does not want to? We do not understand this. Families are thrown into shambles in their world. They said, this example of Sarah Palin was something they divulged themselves. Oh, sure. So you expect us to believe that Sarah Palin wanted her child to take her own life or attempt to do that twice? Seriously, you think she wants to sabotage her own child's life? No. Very often this information is obtained by the media, revealed by the media, and causes that much more pain. They were a world where democracy is distorted. Mudslinging happens, where people think Obama is a fundamentalist because of the media. They were a world which created a cult of personality and hurt opposition members simply because of asymmetric power of certain individuals. But most importantly, they were a world which, under all their language, really did not want minorities to run. Listen to what they said. Maybe I just don't trust that gay man. Maybe that gay man's character isn't something I will vote for. This is disgusting. We don't think you should say that I cannot trust a person who is gay and let the media continue to out him. That is not a world we would stand for. The world of the proposition even took them at their best. We told you we want to create safe spaces for individuals, whether it's for the politician or for the family members who did not consent to have their privacy infringed upon. A space for them to move away from the public sphere which they have committed most of their lives to. We create a world that respected rights and democracy because we believed that no one should be prejudged simply because of elements of their personalities or their character, like their sexuality or any other aspect. Sure, we create apathy about whether or not the person is gay, but that's fine, because we don't think you should judge a person on whether or not he's gay, and take that as an indicator of economic policies, which by their third, they admitted wasn't really matching anyway. We believe that everyone should be allowed to run for public office. We believe that everyone should be given an equal chance and not have that chance taken away simply because you're part of a minority. And for all these reasons, Team Proposition was very firm on our basis that the private life is not the public sphere.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for a break as our judges retire to tabulate the results. I'm sure the judges will have a hard time because both our teams performed remarkably tonight. And after the break, we will be announcing the second team to make it to the World Schools Debating Championships 2015 Grand Finals. Welcome back to the second semi-finals of the World Schools Debating Championships 2015. It's almost time to find out the result, but before we do that, let's give a big round of applause for our semi-finalists for their valiant effort tonight. Now, Ms. Tracy Lee from Canada, one of tonight's judges, will give us some feedback about the debates before announcing the winners. Ms. Lee, what did the panel think about the performance tonight?
Well, thank you very much to all of the debaters. the panel felt unanimously that both teams were very, very vigorous and robust in their defense of their stance. We did feel, some judges, that the speed at which some debaters were delivering their speeches was sometimes challenging to follow. But that being said, we felt that stylistically both teams were very, very, very competent and very engaging. Now, as you know, this debate is adjudicated on the three categories of style, content, and strategy. And stylistically, as I said, both teams were excellent. And the area that the panel actually discussed that was significant to the decision of this debate was the areas of content and the areas of strategy. And I'll speak to content first before I get into strategy. In terms of content, the panel believed that the proposition introduced a very strong principled analysis of this idea of the right to privacy. The opposition does give a number of responses to this, but they didn't necessarily attack the strong principle of this right to privacy. And so the panel essentially felt that that right to privacy, and especially when you considered how that right to privacy also extended to other members of the politicians' families, that was actually quite an important issue within the debate. Now, in the area of strategy, and this was actually where we saw a real difference happening, because the opposition strategy really became clearer as the debate went on. It was crystallized more in the third, and that was where we started to see their real stance coming through. The majority of the panel, and this was a unanimous decision, believed that the opposition was too late in challenging a number of the arguments that the proposition had countered. And so in a 7-0 decision, it went to team proposition.
Congratulations, Singapore, for winning the second semi-final and making it to the grand final. Please join us again tomorrow night to find out who will emerge the victor. Will it be Singapore or Canada of the World Schools Debating Championships 2015? Thank you for joining us tonight, and good night.